Honda has a reputation for being one of the most loved and hated companies in the automotive industry. And this is because they go about things in a slightly different way when it comes to creating their sports cars. They've been able to modify how front-wheel drive cars work and make them as efficient, best handling cars that they could possibly be. And they're most often hated by those who don't truly understand driving, or they're hated by those who just haven't experienced them properly. My name is Logan, and today I'm going to be going over the top 10 cars that Honda ever produced. We are going to be going ahead and ranking them, in my opinion, from number 10 all the way to the number 1 car that Honda created. We're gonna jump right into it with number 10. This car revs to 9,000 RPM. It is a mid-engine rear wheel drive car, beloved by just about anyone in the Honda industry. That is the Honda Beat.
What we have here then is a mid-engine two-seater convertible, which in Japan costs £7,000.
Now this car is incredibly cool. It's a little K car. It doesn't make a lot of horsepower, but that's not the point of it. The point of this car is to be a small, nimble sports car that is very quick around corners, that handles amazing, and that feels good to drive. Now this car is incredibly cool, although it does have a couple of downsides. One of those downsides being that it only came in Japan. It was never sold overseas, and because of that, it makes finding and sourcing parts for this car incredibly difficult and expensive when you do find them. Because of this, a lot of Honda Beat owners have to source their parts from different cars or different models. Now, I think that if this car was sold in North America or in other parts of the world, making it a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier to modify like most Hondas are, I think I would place this car a little bit higher on the list. But at the end of the day, it still made the top 10, still a great car. And if you do want to get one, I would highly recommend it. As long as you're aware they don't hold up to Honda's history of easy fixability and cheap maintenance. Number 9. Now you might see this one coming, you might not, and that is the Honda Fit. Now this car is incredibly well balanced, this car is incredibly lightweight, and it's also a great grocery getter. Now if you've ever talked to a Honda Fit owner, I'm sure they've told you that the Honda Fit actually has the stiffest chassis to ever come in a Honda. In fact, the chassis in the Honda Fit is even stiffer than the NSX, and the reason for this is simply so that they can make the car thinner. Because the car is thinner, you're able to have more cargo space, you're able to haul around more stuff inside of the car while keeping it as small as they can. Now, the Honda Fit isn't just a reliable grocery getter with a stiff chassis. The Honda Fit is actually very well known for handling like a go-kart, very, very good on back roads. It's very well known for being a very well handling car, which is funny actually, because at first glance, it doesn't look like it would be that sort of car. However, if you get your hands on one, if you're able to get behind the wheel of one, you'll know very quickly that these cars are actually quite capable and they're very good at what they do. Next up, number 8, and that is the Honda Civic Si. Now, particularly with the SI trim, it is a very good car, very good intro car if you're a car enthusiast. It is a very common car that people like to modify, and that's because one, it is cheap to buy, it is cheap to own, cheap on maintenance, they're very reliable, and a lot of them are a very good platform to build off of. They're easy to engine swap with just about anything, and at the end of the day, they're still very practical as a to B daily driver car. Now, just about any Civic Si you can get your hands on is going to be a good car to own. However, my personal favorites are the EF, the EG, and the EK. Now these cars are really truly enthusiast cars. There's a lot of aftermarket performance stuff that you can do with them. They're very practical cars, but at the end of the day, they are still very much a driver's car. They handle incredibly well, and they're designed to be able to take corners at high speeds. Next up, number 7. Now this next car is a very unique car. It's an interesting car, and we didn't get it in North America. It came with the K20A, which is the same engine that came in the DC5 Integra Type R out of Japan. It has a 6-speed manual. It makes around 217 horsepower. This is the Honda Accord Euro R. Now, the Euro R is a very interesting car. It just looks like any other Honda. However, it is specifically designed to be a track-ready street car. Factory option with a Momo steering wheel, Recaro seats, and a bunch of other goodies. This car is packed to the brim with a bunch of track options. And it's a very unique kind of car. We didn't get them in North America, as I previously mentioned. But if you're the type to want a sleeper car that you don't really have to do anything to make it faster, the Euro R is a great example. You don't have to do anything to them. They make very good power, they're very reliable, and they don't stand out in a crowd. In my opinion, this is one of the best daily drivers you can buy. The only downside is that if you want one, you have to import it from Japan. Number 6. Now, some of you guys may get upset with me for not putting this higher up on the list. However, I think that it is a very good car, just maybe not the best. That is the Honda Prelude. Now, this car went through 5 different iterations, with a 6th iteration just coming out. It was shown for the first time at the 2025 Tokyo Auto Salon, and it's definitely a very interesting take. However, the thing with the Prelude, and this is the 5th generation that I'm speaking of specifically, it was not necessarily made to be a handling car. Now, don't get me wrong, it handles incredibly, but that's not the main focus with this car. The main focus with this car is to be more of a luxury style car. Most of, if not all, I believe, came with leather interior. It had a 5-speed manual option, and it had a dual overhead cam VTEC engine that would rev over 7,000 RPM. Now, these cars were pretty torquey, but they're not exactly fast in a straight line, because for a Honda, they're on the heavier end. I believe that they weigh around 3,200 pounds, which is okay. Honda never really designed these cars for that. I think that if you are looking for a 90s Honda that you can get in, have it be comfortable, have it be a good, enjoyable driver experience, the Prelude is probably for you. Now, the downside of these cars is that they are definitely getting to be a little bit more on the expensive end. They are selling for upwards of $10,000 to $15,000, and in my opinion, for a 90s Honda that doesn't bear the Type R badge, it just isn't quite worth it. However, to some, these are your dream car, and if this is what you really want, by all means, go after it. They're a great car, they're reliable, they're easy to work on, and they're just overall a well-rounded car. Did I mention they're really torquey as well? All right, so now we're getting into the top 5. The top 5, these cars are pretty special in my opinion. I think that in general, whenever anyone thinks of a enthusiast car that Honda's created, I think that these 5 are always the top to come to mind. And we're gonna jump right into it with number 5, and that is the Honda CRX. Now, these cars are incredibly cool. The EF8 or the SIR came factory with a B16A engine, which makes around 160 horsepower. It's a dual cam 1.6 liter VTEC engine, and they are a ton of fun. Now, these cars are incredibly lightweight. They're just shy of 1,000 kilograms, or right around 2,100 pounds. And because of this, they're very nimble cars. They're very good handling cars, and they're great cars to whip around tight corners. They're a high revving car that revs up to 8,000 RPM. It has a very unique design. However, the biggest downside with these cars is because of their age, they're getting harder and harder to find. Now, if you're able to get your hands on one for a good price, that's a clean example, I highly recommend it. I don't really think there's anything out there that is super comparable to a CRX. Now, moving on to number 4, the newest trim of this car currently holds the title of fastest front wheel drive car around the Nürburgring with a time of 7 minutes and 44.9 seconds. This is the Honda Civic Type R. Now, like I mentioned, the newest trim, the FL5 Type R, has the title for fastest front-wheel drive car on the Nürburgring. However, it's not the first Civic to hold that title. FKA held it beforehand, and every single trim of the Civic has been able to hold some sort of title on tracks. They're very well renowned as a great front-wheel drive race car. They're track-focused cars that you can daily drive, and because of that, that's why it gets number 4. Now, these cars are incredibly special. The very first Civic Type R was released in August of 1997, and they have been going consistently since then. The Civic Type R has been released every single year for the past 28 years, and it doesn't look like Honda's gonna slow down with this. These cars are cool. They came with a manual option even in 2025, every single option of the Civic, and these are a true example of an enthusiast car. Now, the Civic Type R has been a fan favorite of Honda enthusiasts since the very beginning. The EK9 Type R is a very classic, very well-known Civic. It made 170 horsepower and revs past 8,000 RPM. A very good, very well-tuned enthusiast engine that just feels good to drive. And if you're ever in a spot where you're able to get your hands on a Type R of any type, I'd highly, highly recommend it. Now, next up is going to be number 3. Now, this is a very well-known car, very well-loved car. I'd love to be able to get one myself if I ever have the opportunity. But taking home bronze for what is, in my opinion, the best Honda's ever made is the Honda S2000. Now, this is one of very few modern-ish sports cars that Honda has created that had rear-wheel drive. It's a very different car than most of what Honda was doing in the early 2000s, and it's a very special roadster. Now, the F20C, the engine that came in the S2000, is well known for being the best liter to horsepower ratio of any NA Honda. It's on the list for having the best liter to horsepower ratio of NA cars in general. The F20C is a 2-liter dual overhead cam VTEC engine, but what really makes this engine special is the fact that it revs to 9,000 RPM. It is one of the highest revving cars that Honda's created. It sounds good and it feels good, and it just is a good car to drive. This car is not a grocery getter. It is a roadster. It has a trunk, but not a very big one. It doesn't have a lot of room for cargo or, other things you need to bring with you, but it is a very good canyon car. It is a very good track car, and it is a overall very good enthusiast car. Just maybe not the right choice if you're looking for something that you need to go get groceries with or pick the kids up from school. That I would recommend the Honda Fit for. The other downside to this car is that they are getting very, very expensive. They're going for well over $30,000 now, and they're only going to get more expensive and harder to find. But don't get me wrong, if I ever have the opportunity, I would love to still own one of these someday. The S2000 had a track time of 8 minutes and 39 seconds on the Nürburgring, making it a very competitive car. Now, up next, number 2, this car is taking home silver for the best Honda's ever made, in my opinion. This car won the STCC 5 times out of the 6 championships that were held. It has been declared one of the best handling front-wheel drive cars ever made because of its front and rear dual wishbone suspension, and setting a lap time of 8 minutes and 43 seconds flat on the Nürburgring. Factory option with a B Series VTEC engine. Number 2 belongs to, in my opinion, the Integra. Now, I might have a little bit of a bias towards this car, having owned a couple of them. However, having owned a couple of them, I can tell you how incredible they really are. Now, like I mentioned, this car dominated championships in motorsports. It came in a bunch of different trims, from base models with no VTEC all the way to the Type R. This car has an amazing amount of aftermarket support, different kits you can buy for it, all sorts of different parts, things you can do to modify these engines. And for the most part, they're relatively fairly affordable. Even the Type R still are quite affordable. I truly think that this car really does deserve the number 2 position. I've daily driven a GSR for just over a year now. It's an incredible car. It feels good to drive, and it's nice and comfortable. They handle absolutely incredible, even just stock right out of the box. And similar to the Honda Fit, this car has a ton of room. Now, I myself have put 12 wheels inside of the back of one of these. I road tripped it across America with a buddy. They're cheap to buy, they're cheap to own, and they look absolutely beautiful. Number 2 position obviously goes to the Acura Integra. Now, moving on to number 1, the gold medalist of the best Hondas of all time. This is undeniably the greatest car that Honda ever produced. This car carries with it a lot of history and a lot of race wins. This car was tested by one of the greatest F1 drivers of all time, Ayrton Senna. It set a Nürburgring lap time of 7 minutes and 56 seconds, dominated in Super GT. It has won 2 GT 500 championships. It has over 50 race wins, 45 pole positions, and has won 2 drivers championships. The greatest Honda ever made is undeniably the NSX. Now this car is incredibly special. It was Japan's very first supercar and accomplished a lot in its time. It is a rear-wheel drive, mid-engine, street-legal race car, and a lot of design went into making this car as great as it is. Honda developed a new kind of aluminum for building cars with, and with that it created a very lightweight yet very strong full aluminum chassis that the NSX was built off of. And for a power plant, the NSX got a 270 horsepower dual overhead cam VTEC V6 engine that makes around 210 foot-pounds of torque. Now this car gets right down. It is undeniably a track weapon. It's a very good car right out of the box and had a couple of different trim models that you could get. There was the NA1, which is in my opinion the best with the pop-ups, absolutely gorgeous. And then there was the NA2 as well, which is pretty much the same thing, just got rid of the pop-ups. Both models came with a Type R variant, and what the Type R was a slight gain in power, but it mostly had a lot of upgrades to the brakes and the suspension. Then there was also the NSX GT. Now these cars are incredibly rare, but they look absolutely gorgeous. They're a full-on race car, and they're a very unique car. These cars are also very unique for Honda at the time. I don't think anyone really saw it coming. Honda took their F1 division and basically used that to design a street car that you could take to the track. Now this car was incredibly successful. It's a very beautiful looking car, and I think even outside of my own opinion, it is undeniably the best car that Honda ever made. But what do you think? Do you agree with this list? Do you think the NSX is the best car? Are there other cars you would put higher, other cars you would put lower? Is there something that maybe I forgot to mention? I want to hear it all in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the video, or your thoughts on my list, and if there's any other extra points you'd love to add in, feel free to do so. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you watching all the way to the end of the video, and it really helps out the channel. As always, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, like, and comment, and as always, keep it fresh.